Brake caliper, winter inspection and clean. What is it and why you should do it? Let's do this. Right guys, so welcome back to the channel. Please forgive me if the audio's not the best. Just got a bit of a cold at the minute, so my voice isn't the best. So, brake caliper, winter inspection and clean. I say winter inspection just purely because many of us only choose to ride during the warmer months and store the bike up over winter during the colder and wetter months. And so now is an ideal time to pay some attention to your braking system. Although regular checks throughout the riding season are highly recommended, now without much riding to be done and having some time on your hands, it's the perfect time to closely inspect your brakes and make sure they are in good working order. Plus, when the more favourable weather does return, you can just get the bike out, fire it up, and off you go, without having the worry of poorly performing brakes with something like a binding caliper, leaking piston seals, or low brake pad material, for example, thus eating into your riding time with a breakdown or awaiting on parts deliveries, etc. So let's get the caliper mounting bolts loosened off. While the caliper is still attached to the fork leg, get the brake pad retaining pin cracked off. Make sure this unthreads fairly easily. Then we can go ahead and remove the caliper from the fork leg and disc. Remove the brake pad pin along with the pad retaining spring. But take care at this point, as when you remove the pin and the spring, the pads should move freely within the caliper, and if you're not careful, the pads will drop out of the bottom of the caliper body. Fortunately, or unfortunately in my case, these calipers haven't had much attention in some time, as this is a fairly new bike to me. This is the first time I have been in here and the brake pads have seized themselves into the caliper housing and were also stuck to the two pistons. So they needed some gentle persuasion to come free. Hopefully, with the aid of the torch, you can see on camera the amount of grime and build-up of corrosion in and around the caliper body. Some light corrosion on the outer edges of the exposed portions of the pistons. So now to inspect the pads, checking the overall condition, making sure they have sufficient braking material left, making sure there are no obvious signs of failure, i.e. any cracks or chunks missing, or even any material delamination from the backing plate like this one has here. Also, just to note, I'm sure some people might be screaming at the screen right now with me touching all the pad material with my dirty oily gloves, but these pads will be getting replaced with new before the bike goes back on the road, especially with the delamination that has occurred. Obviously, any other time you handle brake pads, you must ensure you do not contaminate the friction material with any greases or oils, for example. Even touching them with your bare, clean looking hands can transfer the natural oils in your skin onto the material, potentially impacting their performance and or safe operation. Some people may argue that this won't have much effect, but personally, when it comes down to the braking system and braking effectively, especially from any sort of speed, I don't take any chances. And when I need to slam on them brakes, I know they will work as intended. Moving on, now let's get these calipers cleaned up a little bit. I didn't realise I'd run out of brake cleaner, so here as a substitute I've just used some acetone I had laying around in a small tub, along with a couple of various sized nylon and brass wire brushes, along with an old toothbrush, and gently scrubbed around all over and inside the caliper, cleaning it all up the best I could, but also making sure not to damage any rubber or perishable parts like the piston seals, for example. Then once everything is pretty clean and free of grime, I come back and pay some attention to the pistons, gently grabbing the front brake lever a couple of times to push the pistons out slightly so I can inspect them for any excessive wear, pitting or corrosion that may affect their operation and or cause the seals to become torn. Luckily, in my case, these pistons are in fairly good condition with just some light corrosion on the outer edges, so I just very carefully try to remove what I can with some Scotch-Brite pad material, but you must be very light and gentle doing this as to not scratch and rough up the surface and prematurely reducing the life and operation of your seals. Ideally, the best thing to do in my opinion is to remove the pistons altogether and give them a gentle polish with some metal polish like Autosol or similar, but this is a more involved process and that's a video for another day. Moving on now, I get the hardware cleaned up with a softish wire brush in the bath of acetone, and I wasn't going very hard on the pad retaining spring as this is a highly visible part once fitted to the bike from above. I didn't want to damage the chrome plating. Once scrubbed clean off camera, I just give it a quick polish with some Autosol. Then carefully chucked up the pad retaining pin into my drill and cleaned off lightly with some sandpaper. And so with the hardware nice and clean, let's start the reassembly process. Gently pushing back the pistons into the caliper that I exposed earlier to create some room for the pads again. Obviously, if you are not reusing your pads, now is the time to install the new ones. Applying a light coat of anti-seize or brake pad paste of your choice. I am just applying a small amount of copper anti-seize grease to the backing plates and a very small amount to any of the sides of the pad that will be coming into contact with the caliper body and need to move freely in operation. Then refit the pads. The pad retaining spring and the retaining pin. Then just tighten the pad pin up by hand for now until we get the caliper and pads over the disc and reattached to the fork leg loosely by hand. Before we torque the fork leg bolts up to 55 Newton meters. Or if you want to be a little bit more precise, I have the pound-foot values shown on screen also. and the pad retaining pin gets torqued up to 18 Newton meters. All that's left to do is give the caliper and surrounding area a quick clean with a cloth and some isopropyl alcohol. While I do that, if you haven't done so already, please like the video and subscribing to the channel. As you can see, at the time of filming, we have just achieved a small milestone of 200 subscribers, and a big thank you to each and every one of you. But as you can see, over 96% of people watching the channel aren't yet subscribed. It only takes a second to do, and it's free to do so, but it would make a big difference to the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you would consider smashing that subscribe button and showing your support so I can continue to make more informative videos like this one. But with that all out the way, all we need to do is grab the front brake lever a couple of times to make sure your pistons are engaged against the back of the pads, and then push or rock your bike back and forth, making sure to test your brakes are working correctly before taking the bike back out onto the road again. Thanks for watching, take care and ride safe.